The Xelari had studied humanity for centuries, watching from the depths of space with the confidence of a species that believed itself supreme. Their empire stretched across thousands of worlds, their technology refined over millennia. They had seen civilizations rise and fall, always assuming that humans were just another primitive race, warlike and chaotic, destined either to be conquered or to burn themselves out. When the time came to invade, they didn't hesitate. Earth was a rich world, filled with resources, and its people were divided, technologically inferior. The Xelari fleets descended in perfect formation, expecting the usual resistance of a lesser species. Their ships hovered above the planet like celestial harbingers of doom, weapons primed to deliver what they thought would be the final war of humanity. It should have been simple. A precision strike to cripple Earth's defenses, a quick dismantling of military infrastructure, and within days, humanity would kneel before the new order. The Xelari had done this to countless species before. There was nothing in their records to suggest humanity would be any different. But as the first bombardments began, something unexpected happened. Across Earth, ancient ruins that had been dismissed as relics of primitive civilizations began to stir. Symbols carved into stone, long thought to be meaningless etchings of early man, glowed with a light that had not been seen in eons. Beneath deserts and oceans, structures buried beneath the crust of the planet activated, sending signals into the void, signals encoded with something the Xelari had not expected, recognition asterisk. It wasn't a plea for help. It wasn't a distress call. It was something far older. The Xelari, for all their intelligence, for all their experience in warfare, had made a mistake that would cost them everything. They had assumed humanity was young. That their history was as brief as their recorded existence on Earth. But history was deceptive, and the truth was far more terrifying. Humanity wasn't young. Humanity wasn't new. They had been here before. Not just on Earth. Not just in one solar system. But across the stars, long before the Xelari had even achieved sentience. As the Xelari warships deployed their ground forces, they were met not with panic, not with confusion, but with something far worse, recognition asterisk. The humans who faced them did not react as if they were seeing aliens for the first time. Their eyes carried something deeper, something buried in their very DNA. Memories, fragments of a time before, when they had walked the stars not as conquerors but as gods. It was in their art, in their mythology, in their legends of lost civilizations and forgotten ages. For eons, they had lived on Earth without remembering what they once were, reduced to myths and dreams. But the invasion, the attack, the unmistakable presence of an enemy they had seen before, it triggered something. A reawakening. Across the planet, human forces moved with unnatural coordination. Military strategies emerged that should have taken decades to perfect. Scientists understood Xelari technology as if they had built it themselves. The ruins that had lain dormant for thousands of years activated, revealing weapons and knowledge far beyond anything the Xelari had ever encountered. It was impossible. It was terrifying. The Xelari fleet, so sure of their superiority, so sure of their victory, found themselves outmaneuvered at every turn. Their ships, so advanced, were torn apart by weapons that should not have existed. Their forces, trained in war for generations, were slaughtered by humans who fought not with desperation, but with memory asterisk. The Xelari High Command panicked. They sent transmissions back to their homeworld, seeking answers, trying to understand what they had awakened. And the response they received was worse than silence. It was fear. Records long buried, histories long erased, secrets hidden even from their own kind resurfaced. The Xelari had not been the first to rise to power in this galaxy. They had inherited it from something before them, something that had vanished without a trace. Or so they had thought. The invasion turned to retreat, retreat turned to desperation. But it was too late. The humans were no longer fighting to survive. They were reclaiming what had once been theirs. The galaxy that the Xelari had ruled for millennia was not a prize to be won, it was a home that had been lost asterisk. And humanity had finally remembered the way back. Point 1. The Xelari invade Earth, believing humanity to be a primitive and inferior species. 2. Ancient ruins and forgotten technology across Earth begin to activate, signaling something long buried. 3. Humans exhibit unnatural coordination, advanced tactical knowledge, and an eerie familiarity with alien technology. 4. The Xelari uncover long-hidden records revealing that humanity was once the dominant species in the galaxy. 5. The invasion turns into a desperate retreat as humanity reawakens its lost power and begins reclaiming its former empire. The Xelari watched Earth for centuries, cataloging human behavior, mapping their weaknesses, and analyzing their history. From the cold reaches of space, their fleets lingered unseen, their probes infiltrating human networks, extracting data. To them, humanity was nothing special, just another warlike species, squandering its potential with internal conflicts, greed, and short-sighted ambitions. The Xelari had seen countless civilizations like this before. Some had burned out before even reaching the stars. Others had become minor annoyances, briefly standing in defiance before being crushed beneath the weight of superior technology. Humanity would be no different. Their leaders saw an opportunity. Earth was rich in resources, its people divided by nations and ideologies. Unlike other galactic species, humans had not yet united under a single banner. There would be no centralized resistance. Instead, fragmented armies would rise, fighting in isolated pockets, easily overwhelmed by Xelari forces. A swift and decisive attack would leave them no time to coordinate, no time to organize any meaningful defense. The fleet gathered at the edge of the Sol system, warships the size of cities moving into formation. The invasion was planned with the precision of a species that had conquered 1,000 worlds. Their strategists analyzed every possible scenario, calculating the speed at which resistance would collapse. In their minds, the humans would panic, their militaries scrambling to understand the scale of what was happening. The Xelari had seen it before, the fear, the confusion, the desperation. It always ended the same way. The first wave arrived undetected, slipping past Earth's primitive sensors. Their stealth vessels descended into orbit, scanning planetary defenses. The humans had satellites, missile systems, and outdated nuclear weapons, but nothing that posed a serious threat. The Xelari disabled communication networks within minutes, silencing the cries for help before they could even begin. Then, the attack commenced. From the skies, fire rained down. Orbital bombardments targeted key military installations. Energy blasts reduced airbases to smoldering craters. Command centers vanished in eruptions of light, their personnel turned to dust before they could even react. The Xelari struck at power grids, disabling entire cities in an instant. Airports were destroyed, naval fleets sunk before they could even deploy. Precision strikes ensured that humanity's most powerful weapons would never leave their silos. On the ground, chaos erupted. Civilians screamed in the streets as the sky turned to fire. Panic spread as cities went dark, as news stations cut to static, as the internet, the lifeblood of modern civilization, ceased to exist. Governments scrambled for answers, but their leaders were just as blind as the people they ruled. There was no warning, no declaration of war, no demand for surrender. One moment, the world was at peace. The next, it was ending. Xelari ground forces deployed in waves. Towering war machines descended from the sky, their metal forms shimmering in the flickering light of burning cities. Armored soldiers, their bodies encased in exoskeletons of living metal, moved with mechanical precision, cutting down anything in their path. Plasma fire streaked through the streets, incinerating entire battalions before they could even organize a counterattack. The Xelari had done this before. They knew what to expect. But something was wrong. As their forces pushed deeper into human territory, they encountered something unexpected. The humans fought back, not just with desperation, not just with courage, but with something far more unsettling. They fought with knowledge asterisk. Tactical formations appeared that the Xelari did not recognize, strategies that should have been impossible for a species that had never fought an extraterrestrial war. Human commanders adapted instantly to alien weaponry, countering Xelari maneuvers as if they had seen them before. Some soldiers moved with an eerie precision, as if they knew what was coming. Civilian resistance was equally unnatural, ordinary people using guerrilla tactics that no untrained mind should have been able to devise. Across the globe, patterns emerged. Human defenses should have been crumbling, yet they were stabilizing. Xelari strike teams found themselves ambushed by forces they had not accounted for. Secure locations, ones that had been expected to fall within hours, held strong. And deep beneath the surface, something else was happening. The Xelari fleet detected unusual energy readings. Their initial scans of Earth had shown no advanced technology beyond human creations, yet now, anomalies were appearing everywhere. Buried structures, long hidden beneath deserts, mountains, and ocean depths, began to stir. Faint power signatures, once indistinguishable from the planet's natural background radiation, started to strengthen. In ancient ruins, long thought to be the work of primitive ancestors, something flickered to life. And then, the signals began. They weren't distress calls. They weren't panicked cries for help. They were pulses, rhythmic and precise, sent not just across the planet, but into the depths of space. The Xelari intercepted them, but their computers could not decipher their meaning. The signals were encoded in a language they did not understand. A language that predated their own. Their strategists dismissed it as interference. Their generals ordered the invasion to continue. Their leaders assured their people that victory was inevitable. They did not yet realize the truth. They had not invaded a young species, stumbling blindly into the stars. They had not come to conquer a race that had only just begun to understand the vastness of the universe. They had walked into something far older, far more dangerous. And for the first time in the Xelari's long history of conquest, they had no idea what they had just awakened. Deep beneath the shifting sands of the Sahara, something ancient stirred. The first bombardments had shattered cities, sending shockwaves through the earth, their force reverberating deep into the crust. At first, the Xelari dismissed the anomalies in their scans as tectonic shifts caused by their own attacks. But then, the signals started. They pulsed through the ground, rhythmic and precise, stretching across continents, linking sites that had long been thought to be nothing more than the ruins of forgotten civilizations. The Great Pyramids, the temples of South America, the massive stone structures buried beneath the jungles of Asia, all of them responded, their long-dormant structures flickering with energy. Ancient stone, long weathered by time, shimmered as circuits unseen to the human eye began to wake. In Antarctica, where thick ice had buried secrets for millennia, cracks formed in the glacial walls. Deep within the Mariana Trench, instruments on a human research vessel flickered wildly, detecting something that should not have been there. Structures, vast and unearthly, shifting as if waking from slumber. Across the world, electromagnetic interference disrupted Xelari sensors, causing their advanced targeting systems to falter. Readings became unreliable. What had once been clear battlefields became blind spots. On board the Xelari command ship, confusion spread. Their analysts tried to trace the source of the interference, but every attempt led them to the same impossible conclusion: Earth itself was responding. The invasion had triggered something buried, something that had been waiting. Human forces, scattered and battered by the initial assault, suddenly found themselves moving with an uncanny sense of purpose. Their leaders, who should have been overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the attack, spoke with an unnatural clarity. Orders were issued not in desperation, but with precision, as if they were following a plan that had long been set in motion. Soldiers took cover in places they had never trained for, using formations that should have been beyond them. In an underground bunker in South America, a team of archaeologists huddled in the darkness, their expedition long since forgotten in the chaos of the invasion. What had once been an academic study of ancient ruins had turned into something else entirely. As tremors rattled the earth, one of them, Drive, Elias Varon, watched in awe as the symbols they had been struggling to decipher suddenly changed. Before their eyes, the carvings reformed, shifting in a way that stone should not have been able to move. The patterns that had baffled linguists for decades were now unmistakable. Not warnings, not prayers, not primitive records of gods and kings. They were instructions. Varon's hands shook as he reached for his communicator, but there was no need. The information was already spreading. Across the planet, in underground facilities and ancient ruins, a similar realization was dawning. The knowledge had been hidden in humanity's past, waiting to be understood. In orbit, the Xelari warships detected massive energy fluctuations beneath the surface. Readings spiked unpredictably, making it impossible to determine where new threats would emerge. The Xelari command structure, so reliant on calculated efficiency, struggled to respond. Their conquest had been planned based on the assumption that humanity was a fledgling species, one without the means to resist a superior force. But now, the battlefield was shifting. In the deep caverns beneath the Himalayan mountains, a forgotten vault hissed as ancient locks disengaged. Air that had not been disturbed in eons rushed out in a frozen gust, carrying with it the dust of a lost age. The massive doors, covered in strange carvings, groaned as unseen mechanisms rumbled to life. Beyond them lay rows of structures that defied explanation, towers of metal and stone fused together, control panels blinking with a soft glow. The air was thick with the weight of something old, something waiting. A team of surviving resistance fighters stumbled upon the entrance, drawn by something they couldn't explain. Lieutenant Kara Holt, her uniform torn and stained with smoke, reached out to the nearest console. The moment her fingers brushed against its surface, symbols danced across the screen. She shouldn't have been able to understand them, but deep inside her mind, something clicked. Without thinking, she activated the system. Elsewhere, similar awakenings took place. In the Yucatan Peninsula, an excavation site that had been abandoned years ago flared with an eerie blue light. In the deserts of Africa, beneath the shifting sands, monolithic obelisks trembled as if sensing the change in the world above. Hidden beneath the Pacific Ocean, an immense circular structure, its surface weathered by time, sent out a deep, resonant pulse. The pulse was not a distress call. It was not a signal of surrender. It was recognition. The Xelari, monitoring from their command vessels, scrambled to decipher the meaning. Their linguists, their best analysts, worked desperately to understand what they were witnessing. The energy readings were unlike anything they had seen before. The symbols appearing on their screens did not match any known human language, yet they were undeniably tied to the structures across the planet. And then, an even more unsettling discovery emerged. These symbols were not human. They predated recorded history. They predated even the most ancient of civilizations. And yet, they were encoded within humanity itself, buried in their art, their myths, their subconscious. The realization spread like wildfire through the Xelari command. If humanity had created these structures, if they had once wielded this power, then the implications were beyond comprehension. They had assumed they were fighting an emerging species, one that had barely touched the stars. But what if they weren't? What if the Xelari were not invaders of a primitive world? What if they were trespassers on the remnants of an empire far older than their own? Human forces should have collapsed within hours. That was how it had always gone before. The Xelari had conquered countless species across the galaxy, each one falling in predictable patterns. Resistance was inevitable but brief, panicked counterattacks, desperate attempts to flee, scattered and disorganized rebellion. The same would happen here. Their analysts had predicted as much. The first wave of orbital bombardments had struck Earth's key military installations, crippling major defense centers, severing communications, and plunging cities into chaos. With the global network shattered, there should have been no chance for any coordinated response. Yet something was wrong. The Xelari ground forces encountered resistance almost immediately, but not the kind they had anticipated. Instead of panicked civilians fleeing in terror or military forces struggling to regroup, they found themselves facing human units that moved with an almost unnatural level of organization. In cities reduced to rubble, soldiers fought in perfect formations, executing tactical maneuvers with eerie precision. At first, the Xelari commanders assumed this was simply human military training at work. Perhaps they had underestimated how well these forces had been prepared. But the patterns emerging across the planet did not match any known human warfare doctrine. Resistance cells, which should have been random and uncoordinated, moved as if following an unspoken strategy. Civilians, untrained and unequipped for war, used guerrilla tactics as if they had studied them for generations. Every ambush, every counterattack, every strategic retreat was executed with flawless timing. The Xelari began to analyze battle footage, looking for a pattern, for some logical explanation. What they found unsettled them. Human forces were not reacting to the Xelari invasions in ways that should have been possible for a species fighting aliens for the first time. They were anticipating attacks before they happened. Infantry units repositioned themselves before Xelari scouts could locate them. Counterstrikes occurred at the exact weak points of enemy formations, exploiting vulnerabilities that should have been classified. It was as if the humans were not learning how to fight the Xelari, they were remembering. In regions where human resistance should have been weakest, the most inexplicable phenomena occurred. In the ruins of a bombed-out city, a group of survivors, most of whom had never fired a weapon in their lives, managed to take down an entire Xelari patrol unit. The bodies of the fallen aliens were found arranged in a pattern, one that Xelari historians recognized. It was a formation used in rituals of victory, not by humans, but by a long-extinct species that had once dominated the stars. A species whose ruins had long been erased from official records. The reports flooded in from across the planet. In the burning remains of Paris, a commander who had no history of interstellar combat devised an anti-air defense strategy that precisely mirrored the tactics used in a war that had taken place thousands of years ago, in a system light years from Earth. In the underground bunkers beneath Beijing, military officers deciphered alien technology with unsettling ease, reprogramming Xelari drones to turn against their own kind within minutes. In the jungles of the Amazon, a group of rebels activated a long-dormant facility buried beneath the earth, emerging armed with weapons that had no known human origin. The Xelari intelligence division frantically searched for an explanation. Was there another force at play? Had humans been secretly trained by another species? But no records indicated such an alliance. And then came the final, most disturbing revelation. It wasn't just soldiers who were displaying this knowledge. It was everyone. Children, too young to understand war, instinctively knew how to avoid detection by enemy patrols. Elderly civilians, with no military background, gave strategic advice that turned the tide of battles. Artists who had never seen an alien world before began sketching landscapes of planets that no longer existed, planets the Xelari had wiped from history. At first, the Xelari thought this was coincidence. But the more they studied, the more undeniable the truth became. This was not random luck. It was not merely human adaptability. It was something far deeper. Something buried. The humans were remembering things they should not have known. Tactical maneuvers from wars that had never been recorded in their history. Knowledge of technology that had never existed on Earth. Recognition of enemy formations that they had no way of having encountered before. This was no ordinary species. They were not simply a young civilization learning to fight a superior enemy. They had been here before. The Xelari had assumed that they were the advanced invaders, crushing a primitive people. But what if they had gotten it wrong? What if the humans were not rising to meet a new threat, but reclaiming something that had been lost? What if humanity had fought this war before? What if Earth was not their home, but their prison? The Xelari command structure was in disarray. The invasion, which had been calculated down to the finest detail, was unraveling in ways no strategist had predicted. The humans should have been overwhelmed, their resistance crushed before it could even begin. Yet across every front, the same disturbing reality was emerging: the humans were not merely resisting. They were adapting, fighting with an efficiency and familiarity that should have been impossible. Desperate for answers, Xelari intelligence operatives sifted through intercepted human transmissions, ancient records, and battlefield data. They needed an explanation for what they were witnessing. How had a species that had never encountered alien war suddenly mastered interstellar combat? How had they gained access to technology that should have been beyond their understanding? How were they countering strategies the Xelari had spent millennia perfecting? Deep in the archives of their flagship, data analysts unearthed a series of anomalies, records from archaeological teams that had surveyed Earth decades prior to the invasion. At the time, the findings had been dismissed. Nothing about humanity had seemed remarkable. Their civilization was young, their history fragmented, their wars nothing but primitive struggles over land and resources. There had been ruins, of course, buried cities, unexplained artifacts, but that was common among developing species. None of it had raised any alarms. But now, those overlooked details carried new weight. The ruins had not belonged to humanity's ancestors. They had not been the remnants of a primitive civilization struggling toward enlightenment. The architecture, the materials, the intricate patterns in the stone, none of it matched Earth's known history. And yet, despite being eons old, they showed no signs of weathering, no natural erosion, no records of a transition from primitive to advanced. They had simply been there asterisk. Waiting. More disturbing were the energy readings. Long before the invasion, Xelari surveyors had detected faint but persistent anomalies beneath Earth's surface, traces of something ancient, something active asterisk. The anomalies had been dismissed as natural geothermal fluctuations. Now, those same readings were spiking across the planet. Whatever had been buried beneath the Earth for millennia was no longer dormant. On the battlefield, Xelari forces encountered even more inexplicable phenomena. Human soldiers recovered from injuries at unnatural speeds. Those who should have been mortally wounded pushed forward as if guided by something unseen. Some survivors displayed knowledge of Xelari technology that no human should have possessed. In an underground facility beneath what was once a research station in Siberia, a squad of Xelari scouts discovered something that defied explanation. A chamber, vast and untouched by time, its walls lined with glyphs in a language older than any recorded civilization. And at its center, a pedestal bearing a metallic object, something neither fully machine nor organic, pulsating with a dim, rhythmic light. One of the scouts, a veteran of dozens of planetary campaigns, reached out to touch it. In an instant, his mind was flooded with images, memories not his own. He saw humans, but not as they were now. They walked among the stars, their fleets stretching across galaxies, their technology beyond anything the Xelari had ever imagined. He saw them wielding forces that bent reality itself, constructing cities that floated above planets of their own design. He saw worlds shattered by war, burning under the weight of their own power. And then, he saw the fall, something greater than the Xelari, something that had driven humanity back, forced them to retreat, to forget *. The scout's body convulsed, his mind unable to withstand the weight of what he had witnessed. His comrades barely had time to react before he collapsed, his body lifeless, his consciousness burned away by the knowledge he had glimpsed. The others hesitated only a moment before destroying the chamber, erasing all evidence of what they had found. But it was too late. The realization had already begun to spread through the Xelari ranks. The humans had not simply been another species struggling to find its place in the cosmos. They had once ruled it. They had been the architects of empires that predated the Xelari's own rise. And for some reason, whether by choice or by force, they had buried that past, locked it away within their own genetics, within the foundations of their world, within the stories they told as myths and legends. The invasion had not awakened a primitive world. It had reawakened something far older, something that had been waiting for the right moment to return. And now, it was too late to stop it. The Xelari invasion force had been prepared for every possible scenario. Their conquest of other worlds had followed a pattern that had never failed them: overwhelm the target with precise orbital strikes, sever communications, cripple infrastructure, and eliminate leadership before resistance could fully form. Against primitive species, it was not a battle. It was a demonstration of inevitability. Earth should have been no different. The first phase had gone exactly as planned. Major cities lay in ruins. Military command centers were decimated in coordinated strikes. Their global communication networks flickered, and for a brief moment, it seemed as though humanity would collapse into the chaos the Xelari had come to expect. But as they pushed deeper, taking control of more territories, something began to shift. The resistance was not behaving as it should. Even in species with some level of resilience, disorganization was expected. Factions would fight separately, desperate and disconnected, some focusing on survival rather than war. But here, there was no fragmentation. The humans adapted instantly, as if they had been expecting this invasion, as if they were following a plan older than their civilization. The Xelari had studied Earth's history, believing they understood the species they were about to conquer. Human warfare had always been defined by internal conflict, tribes against tribes, nations against nations, ideologies clashing endlessly. Their technology was primitive by interstellar standards, their spacefaring capabilities limited, their knowledge of war confined to their own planet. They had no allies among the stars, no advanced weaponry, no reason to pose a threat to a species as superior as the Xelari. Yet as Xelari troops pushed forward, they encountered anomalies that defied all logic. Human forces should have been scrambling to coordinate, yet they moved with an uncanny sense of unity. Entire cities reorganized themselves for defense in mere hours. Military strategies were executed with such precision that even the Xelari, with their advanced tactical algorithms, struggled to counter them. And then there were the civilians. They should have been panicking, fleeing, surrendering. But instead, they resisted in ways no analysis had predicted. Farmers with no combat experience set ambushes that crippled Xelari supply chains. Children led evacuation efforts with the coordination of trained officers. Even those gravely wounded refused to succumb, pressing forward as though guided by something beyond their own instincts. Xelari intelligence divisions began investigating these irregularities, combing through every available source of data. What they found was impossible to dismiss. The first warning signs had come long before the invasion. Archaeological records indicated structures buried beneath Earth's surface, monuments that predated any known civilization, structures that had no apparent origin. Some had been dismissed as natural formations, others as early attempts at construction by primitive societies. None had been considered significant. But new data painted a different picture. These structures were not ruins of an emerging species. They were remnants of something far older. The materials used in their construction were unlike anything found naturally on Earth. Some resonated with energy signatures the Xelari could not fully identify. The deeper their scans went, the more anomalies surfaced: underground chambers sealed away beneath mountains, vast networks of tunnels containing metals that did not match any known element from the planet's crust. One site, buried deep beneath the ice of Antarctica, emitted a pulse the moment Xelari ships entered Earth's orbit. It was faint at first, a rhythmic signal that seemed like background noise. But then, as the invasion progressed, the signal grew stronger. The frequency shifted, synchronized itself with ancient human radio transmissions, and then spread. Reports flooded in from occupied zones. Xelari forces experienced disruptions in their communications, targeting systems failed at crucial moments, and strange energy readings interfered with scanning technology. What had once been routine engagements turned into chaotic battles where humans exploited weaknesses they should not have known existed. The implications were impossible to ignore. Humanity was not reacting to an invasion. It was remembering how to fight one. The commanders dismissed the idea at first. The Xelari prided themselves on logic, on data, on what could be proven. Yet the more they analyzed, the clearer the pattern became. Human soldiers were using tactics that had never been recorded in their history. They were responding to Xelari strategies before they had even been deployed. Civilian engineers repurposed alien technology within hours, creating countermeasures that should have taken years to develop. Something buried within them had awakened. On board the Xelari flagship, an emergency council was assembled. The High Command reviewed intercepted transmissions, battlefield reports, and the growing number of unexplained phenomena. The conclusion was one they had never considered possible. Humanity was not a young species standing at the threshold of interstellar war. They were something else entirely. The pieces were all there. The ancient structures, the unexplained knowledge, the instinctive response to war at a scale they had supposedly never experienced. These were not the signs of a species encountering galactic conflict for the first time. They were the signs of a species that had forgotten it. The evidence stretched beyond the battlefield. Linguists studying human mythology found troubling correlations between their oldest legends and historical records from long-extinct civilizations. Stories of lost empires, great wars against incomprehensible enemies, gods who descended from the stars, all dismissed as primitive storytelling. But when cross-referenced with the Xelari's own knowledge of ancient conflicts, the similarities were undeniable. There had been an empire that once rivaled the greatest civilizations of the galaxy. It had spanned countless worlds, wielded power that few could comprehend. It had ruled, expanded, warred. And then, suddenly, it had vanished, wiped from history so completely that even the Xelari, with their vast archives, had only scraps of information about it. It had been a mystery, an unsolved question that had lingered for millennia. And now, they knew the answer. The empire had not been destroyed. It had hidden itself. Humanity had not evolved from primitive origins into an emerging power. They had been powerful once before. Something had reduced them to this, to a state where they no longer remembered what they had once been. The invasion had not brought an end to a primitive civilization. It had reawakened an ancient one. The moment this realization settled in, fear spread through the Xelari command. If this was true, if humanity was not discovering war for the first time but reclaiming it, then they were facing an enemy far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. They had come to conquer a species they believed to be weak, unaware that they had just declared war on the remnants of a force that had once ruled the stars.